Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So the rant that I wrote and published this morning over at HartmannReport.com is actually it's titled Trump's Shadow Cabinet is part of his ongoing coup. I'm guessing most of you didn't even know that Trump has a shadow cabinet. It's possible that he doesn't. Well, let's define terms first. A shadow cabinet. There are 3 countries in the English-speaking world. There's 4 major countries in the English-speaking world: the U.S., Canada, the U.K., and Australia. And people sometimes add in New Zealand. And of those countries, the only one that doesn't have what's called a shadow government is the United States. And back on literally on Election Day of last year, on November, what was it, 3rd, as I recall, I said on this program, you know, we didn't know if Biden was going to win or not, and, you know, it certainly looked like he was. All the polling indicated he was, but that was the case 4 years earlier, too. All the polling showed Hillary Clinton was going to win by more than 3 million votes, which she did. You know, 77,000 votes in 4 swing states turned it for Donald Trump, and it looks like all of them came about as the result of a combination of voters being purged from the voting rolls in several of those states, and a massive influx of money from the United Arab Emirates and from Russia via trolls to convince, in particular, black people not to vote for Hillary Clinton because of her super predator comment. That was the principal thing that was going out. And then there was also the, oh, both sides are the same, don't even bother showing up. That was going out. Those were the main memes. But in any case, you know, when I was talking about that on the air, I said, you know, if Biden loses this election and Trump gets a second term, then what Biden should do is set up a shadow government with a shadow cabinet, like they do in the UK and Australia and Canada. And that way, the shadow government, you know, if the government, if Trump's government comes out and says, okay, our new immigration policy is that we're going to shoot people at the border, and the shadow cabinet then comes out and the shadow immigration czar says, no, if we were in power, our policy would be completely different. It's just a way of communicating what you would do, right? The shadow governments and the shadow cabinets, and that's what they're called. And I've got links to them, actually, in the article for the UK, Canada, and Australia in the piece I wrote over at HartmannReport.com today. Those shadow governments are not trying to disrupt their government. They're not trying to overthrow their government. They're not claiming that they are actually the government when they are not. They are simply saying, you know, if you put us in power in the next election, this is how we would respond to this thing that is happening today. And I think that's a good idea, actually. I think both parties in the United States should do the same thing. But Trump was on a fringe right-wing, internet-based TV show over the weekend. Or not Trump, excuse me, it was Mark Meadows, his last chief of staff. And he said, this was Friday night, and he said, we met with several of our cabinet members tonight. We actually had a follow-up meeting with some of our cabinet members. He used the phrase cabinet or cabinet members, as I recall, 17 or 18 times in that interview. And then he referred to Trump the same way that Trump refers to himself and other people refer to him in the literally daily now fundraising emails I'm getting from Donald Trump. He has brought in $100 million in the first 6 months of the year from the poor shills that get these emails from him, and or the poor suckers that get these emails from him. And in them, he refers to himself as President Trump. And that's what Mark Meadows said, which was very strange. He said, Donald Trump is a president who is fully engaged, highly focused, and remaining on task. And what this tells me is that we have been looking at January 6th with the wrong lens. We've been thinking that January 6th was the moment of the attempted coup. And I'm saying, no. Donald Trump started the coup, the attempt to overthrow the United States government and end democracy in America. He started that, I could actually build an argument that he started it back during the primaries in 2015, but really in a big way the day after he lost the election on November 4th, when he started talking about there was fraud in Philadelphia, and there was fraud in Detroit, and there was fraud in Pittsburgh, and there was fraud in Milwaukee, and there was fraud in Atlanta. And there's fraud in Phoenix, all towns with large black populations. And by the way, it's only counties with large black populations that Republicans are talking about auditing. They're only doing Maricopa County in Arizona. They only want to do Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. They're talking about doing Detroit in Michigan. I mean, this is really all about race. But my point is that the coup began the day after the election, the day after Trump lost the election, and is still rolling on. It is still happening. You know, Voltaire famously said that if you can make people believe absurdities, you can cause them to commit atrocities. Jim Jones basically said if you can convince people, I mean, it didn't say, but his actions, that if you can convince people enough, you can cause them to kill themselves. But Jones was a piker. He only killed 913 people. Donald Trump has killed, according to some pretty good medical analysis, at least 400,000 of the 610,000 Americans who have died already did not need to die and would not have died had the United States simply taken the same, masking and contact tracing choices back when Trump was president that South Korea did, that Taiwan did, that Japan did, that most of Europe did. We wouldn't have had those deaths. But now, I mean, to this day, to this moment, there are people showing up in hospitals, deathly sick, claiming that I can't have COVID. There's no such thing. It's a hoax. Donald Trump told me it's a hoax. I know I read it on Facebook. It's a hoax. As they're having, the anesthetic put in their vein to knock them unconscious so that they can shove a tube down their throat to breathe for them. I don't have COVID. It's not possible. I memean, Jim Jones was a piker. You got this Pastor Greg Locke in Tennessee. He's saying, this vaccine and then this disease, it's all a hoax. And if you wear a mask in my church, I'll throw you out, and don't get vaccinated. This guy has blood on his hands because the coup is rolling on. Down in Florida, you've got Ron DeSantis, who's trying to live up to his name of Ron DeathSantis, which is, I mean, this is pretty amazing when you think about it. If it's true that a majority of the people who are dying of COVID are right-wing Republicans, I think it was less true a year ago than it is now. 39,000 people have died of COVID in Florida that we know of. DeSantis fired his state epidemiologist because she was claiming that he was radically undercounting the number of deaths. But 39,000 plus officially died of COVID in Florida. Ron DeSantis won the last election by 32,463 votes. Is he killing off his own voters? And by the way, that was after he had purged over 1 million voters, or not he, but the Republican Party had purged over 1 million voters from the Florida voting rolls in the 24 months before the election. But now DeSantis is issuing an executive order saying that you cannot mandate that kids in schools wear masks when kids can't get vaccinated. And the older kids, the kids over 12, they have one of the lowest vaccination rates in the country, particularly in Florida, because their parents aren't vaccinated. And I'm telling you, when these kids go back to school, and in some, I believe in Georgia, they're starting back to school right now, this week. In Florida, it's going to be in about 2 weeks. When these kids go back to school, all hell is going to break loose. Because this virus is as contagious as chickenpox. And chickenpox just rips through communities. But apparently, no matter how many of the Trump followers they kill, the coup just keeps rolling along. They are still trying to end democracy in America. The Washington Post had a headline, a week or so ago. This was the base because of a CBS News poll, found half of all registered Republicans think a more effective strategy for their party than coming up with ideas that people want to vote for is changing voting laws so that Democrats can't vote. The headline in the Washington Post, almost half of Republicans admit they're ready to ditch democracy. That was just the headline. Trump And by the way, this coup is very profitable. Trump has raised, as I said, over $100 million. DeSantis has raised $44 million. Marjorie Trader Greene raised $3 million in the first 3 months of the year, and she wasn't doing anything. She'd lost all her committee assignments for lying to her voters. I mean, you've got a bunch of Trumpy Republicans who are just rolling in the dough. So what I'm saying is, and now we hear that, you know, the proof that it started the day after the election, Trump goes to his Department of Justice and says, just declare this election marred with fraud, and me and my Republican congressman will take care of it from there. We'll take it from there. Right. And then, you know, that didn't work. The DOJ didn't go along with it. So January 6th happened, where they tried to assassinate Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. And the only person, by the way, and I don't know why this doesn't get highlighted, and it is in the news coverage, but it's very rarely highlighted. The only person who had the authority to activate the D.C. National Guard was the president. They're under the direct control of the executive branch. Every other state, it's the governor, but there is no governor in D.C. It's the district. It's not the state of Columbia. They don't have statehood. And the mayor of the district has no power over the National Guard, although there's legislation right now to try to give it to her. But, you know, Trump would not, and Trump's guy, Chris Miller, would not activate the National Guard. And meanwhile, we've got, you know, all across the United States, local school boards being seized by anti-American Trumpies, you know, followers of this former reality TV star. And this is becoming a very alarming phenomenon. So I'm telling you, this coup was not January 6th. It started with the Trump presidency. It went on steroids the day after he lost the 2020 election. And it continues to this day with just as much momentum as it ever had. And it's spinning off hundreds of millions of dollars that the people who are promoting it are stuffing in their pockets. Let us not be fooled.